Hey everyone! We're going to do something very different today. This is something I haven't done on the channel before. It's going to be my version of a Let's Play. And the game that I've chosen here is Baldur's Gate 3, which is going to be interesting because I know nothing about Baldur or his gate. I haven't played the other two games. I'm very familiar with like Divinity, Neverwinter Nights, a lot of those turn-based combat games, RPGs, choices matter, a lot of that stuff is involved here. So the first thing that we've got to deal with, I guess, is figuring out where we are, what we are, how this is all working. The cutscenes start to give you an idea that you're basically trapped in this ship, you're a prisoner, and they're going to stick this worm thing in your eye. It's really gross. Turns out this Cthulhu guy over here is basically a mind flayer, and he wants to make you into a baby mind flayer by giving you one of these larvae. Now, keep in mind, I am not this orcish-looking lady here. You would think at this point I would not get a worm in the eye, right? Like something is going to happen. There's going to be, some kind of explosion or interference. Something would stop this from happening, right? Nope, not the case here. Get the worm right in the eye. Interestingly enough, this is when you actually get to make your character now. There looked to be a ton of different options, and I knew that gnomes had just come out, so that was kind of something that was a little bit appealing to me. For me, and I'm assuming for a lot of people, this has got to be one of the toughest parts of the game, is really choosing who you're going to be for the duration of the game. It matters a lot, especially in a game like this. If you pick a cleric, if you pick a bard, if you pick a fighter, you're going to have different options for everything. This go round, I just felt like playing a bard. I thought it would be kind of a fun way of going about it, and I looked for the race and everything that would kind of best fit that role. So I landed on Tiefling. Yeah, he kind of looks like Satan, but, once I was happy with the hairstyle and everything, then you have to design another character, which I was a little surprised by, but this is apparently the person that you dream about. So I threw together a person. Once we're done with that whole process, we can go back into the post-worm-in-your-head world and figure out what the heck is going on, because we're still trapped on this ship with Cthulhu, and apparently it's a very octopusy, squiddy type of ship. It flies. This is making very little sense for someone such as myself who's never really played Baldur's Gate, but I'm running with it. I'm starting to get a little anxious to get through the cutscenes and start to get into the game, but I'm getting a real sense that Cthulhu is not playing around with this town. The scene really gives you a better sense of like the harvest that's going on, where this guy's just basically showing up, wreaking havoc, grabbing everybody and transporting them to the ship. There's some dragon people that appear. I mean, it's absolute chaos. Originally, I figured the dragons were on Team Squid, but it turns out that's not the case, and they wreck his ship. And it looks like, very well, everything could have been lost if it weren't for the amazing squid-based technologies that this ship possesses that somehow allow it to teleport when you just add tentacles together. So he does that, and then poof, we're gone. And that should be the end of it. But no, the dragons are magic, and they can follow through magical portals, so they do that. And they continue to wreck the ship until it eventually takes way too much damage and is just obviously going to crash. Lord Cthulhu over here is trying to get his tentacle technology back together again, and a dragon busts its head through and just kind of interrupts that process. It sort of works, but it sort of doesn't. But the resulting crash has enough impact that stuff is definitely messed up. Orc Lady is now out of her cage, and you get this brief moment through her eyes where you can kind of get a sense of where you finally ended up. It doesn't really seem like the greatest place, though I did think it was really clever to have the floating number 3 there to symbolize Baldur's Gate 3. Great job. And now suddenly, we're in the game. While there wasn't a scene that actually shows your pod breaking or shows you escaping, it drops you right into the game right outside of a broken pod, so you can kind of put together what happened. So, to briefly recap, we are on a busted ship, which is still flying from what it seems like. We've got a worm in our head, and we really don't have any kind of plan. So, time to explore, I guess. I ran over to the creepy nursery thing where all the worms hang out, because the top had busted open, and it looked interesting. And it presented actually the first dice roll attempt that I had in this game, which I actually really love the concept of. And as you can see, I'm incredibly lucky as well. Based on this, obviously there were no secrets whatsoever anywhere around this worm tank, so I moved on. Exploring the first couple of rooms of the ship really just felt like more of a tutorial, of course, for how to move the camera around, how to click on stuff. With most games like this, there's usually a button that will light up interactable objects too, so at this point I'm kind of looking around for that, but I'm not really seeing something that meets what I'm expecting. You can hit Alt, for example, and it'll light up corpses that are on the ground, but it won't actually light up everything that you could potentially interact with. So there's a lot of moving the mouse around to kind of find stuff in this game. This is one of those cool game setups, though, where everything is more interactable than you might expect. You can actually pick up a whole chest, for example, not just the items inside of it, if you chose to. You probably wouldn't, but you could. So after I'd officially gotten my bearings, I just continued to explore around until I found something a little creepy. I find a guy strapped to a table, and his brain is screaming at me to help them. And I felt like that was worth a moment of my time. One thing I'll make a note of, which is really cool, is sometimes in games like this, you have perception checks as you walk around and explore. So if your character has good perception, you might find something hidden. Well, in this game, this is the first time I've ever seen anything like this, you actually have that in cutscenes as well. So you could see in the corner where perception checks are either failed or succeeded, things like that are going on in the middle of a cutscene. Anyway, back to the story, you have this brain basically pleading with me to take it out of this man's head, which is a super weird thing to do, but, I have a lot of options here. So I go into an intelligence check to kind of examine. I'm going to do a medical analysis of this brain because I am now a neurosurgeon. And luckily my patient has zero idea how very barely I passed that success check. But because I was successful, it gave me the option to actually take the brain out. This one seemed like a really easy roll, so I anticipate the brain is going to kill me.
The brain lifts from the skull, but you notice an opportunity. You could cripple the strange creature, making it more subservient, should it prove a threat.
And then the game gave me this option, so I was like, okay, I might as well. And so yeah, I mutilated the heck out of the brain with my thumbnail.
The creature seems unaware of your interference. It relaxes in your hands.
So I got myself what seems to be a pet. It's a really gross pet. It's basically a gigantic brain with a bunch of tentacles and some really creepy bird feet for whatever reason.
Our freedom is ours, friend.
But the little guy seems psyched, so okay. This scene opens up a concept in the game where the worm in your head can help communicate to other worms in other heads and I guess control thoughts, or at this point you're just kind of getting a sense that it's like a telepathy link of some sort. Your little brain pet dude who just refers to himself as us is basically letting you know that, hey, we need to make it to the helm because we're thralls of this mind flayer guy and we've got to get up there to help him. And once you agree to do that, you're back on the road again. Another really cool thing that I haven't seen in other games is the physical interactions with the game world. So you actually have a jump ability, like a physical ability based on your strength that allows you to move from one platform to another within the game world. Obviously that's a super common thing in lots and lots of games, but not typically within this genre or this style of game. And at this point, we get to see a familiar face. The orc-looking lady is back. Now she's calling us abominations, and she wants to kill us, but it doesn't take long. Your brains connect in that weird mind worm thing, and eventually you guys come to an agreement that you're both victims. Luckily, she's got a basic understanding of what's going on, so she's giving the details that I've already kind of leaked to you guys. What you have in your head is actually a larval mind flayer, so eventually it's going to grow up, and you're going to explode, and you turn into a mind flayer. Unsurprisingly, you guys decide to work together, so you have a fighter now in your party. It was at this point I actually realized that the cutscenes don't pause the game in any meaningful way, so if things happen to your game characters in the world, or if they're not there, they don't show up in the cutscenes, which is fun and interesting. So I got this new fighter in my party. I took maybe about 10 steps, and I ended up in my very first fight with a couple of little imps. This fight felt mostly like a tutorial, so it wasn't very challenging, but it did make me start looking forward to some of the variety in fights. There's a lot that I think I could say about the level design and some of the strategies that you can use by using things like height to give yourself advantage with ranged attacks, or you can use things that are on the ground. You know, you can coat your weapon in fire, for example, by just dipping it into fire that happens to be burning nearby. You can take anything from your inventory and literally just throw it if you want to. Super cool options. Our little team destroyed these imps without much trouble at all, and it was just a matter of cleaning up the loot and moving on to the next section. Making it onto the surface of the ship presented me with a number of moral and ethical questions to answer myself. You know, do you save the people who are rolling around on the ground, helpless, or not? Especially when you got someone in your party basically saying, they're too far gone, they're gonna kill you. As it turns out, Lady Orcface is not really known for her compassion. Say what you will, I followed her advice, I ignored the people, and I moved on. And I ended up in my first real non-tutorial fight, which went really well. Obviously, these aren't very dangerous enemies. This is still very much the intro to the game, so I didn't expect it to be a massive challenge. At the same time, I should note that most of these bodies that drop, though, they're not carrying much of anything, so the loot feels really bare at this current point in time. As the tutorial type stuff is getting fewer and further between, they introduce destructible environments, which is pretty cool. You can break down doors and things that get in your way. But then that brings us to another room full of choices. I'm immediately warned by the orc lady not to touch a thing, and I'm assuming if I hit any of those 3 very tempting looking buttons, something terrible would happen. So again, I chose to follow the advice, and I ignored the lady who was trapped in this pod. Give me some credit, I did at least look around for a latch, but I didn't actually try to do much of anything. Going back to exploring the room, I found a sigil, and eventually I found a body that had a fancy looking key on it that opens the fancy looking chest that happens to be right in the other room. It was at this point where it looked like we were about to reach the helm, and I was going to have to do as she said. Alright, so let me set the scene. You've got Cthulhu over here fighting with this demon guy, actually a whole set of demon guys. I don't know if these guys are related to the dragons. I don't really know where the demons actually kind of came from, but Cthulhu is getting his ass handed to him, essentially, and he needs your help. So he's going to ask you to go over to those tentacles. I don't know if he thinks the tentacle teleport thing is going to help him in his fist fight or what, but that's the point of this fight. Alright, so the fight I'm in right now, it's not super intense. We're trying to make our way closer and closer to the tentacles, but every once in a while there's going to be ads that keep spawning. Squidface over there is doing his best to continue to fight the good fight with this dragon boss, and you actually don't have to fight that guy whatsoever. In fact, he yells at you if you try.
Leave him to me.
I eventually make my way to the tentacular station, where there's an inconvenient dragon who's basically just waiting there for his moment. So he blasts the absolute crap out of Orcface. And while she seems absolutely fine, this scene seems to imply that the squid-based technology is not connected properly, I guess? Or maybe it is. I don't know. It worked, but kinda doesn't. People go flying. Gravity is just not happening in this type of environment. We're in hyperspace at this point. I totally understand this is a fantasy environment, so I don't know what the laws of physics here actually might be. But as we're seeing her kind of flying in space here, we get the sense that she just needs to touch that one little tentacle and then the whole problem will be fixed, right? And she does. And then poof, we have magically appeared once again. We are now hovering over a new city. This time we're kind of falling apart. I mean, the ship doesn't really look great. Daddy Mind Flayer over here, not doing great at all. I suddenly get clapped by a rock that just comes out of nowhere, an explosion, knocks me the hell out, and I'm flying out of the ship. Now here, I'm falling down to the planet, and I am completely unconscious. And milliseconds before my final demise, I am caught by a magical force of golden light, which saves me. And then it drops me. Alright guys, that's going to conclude Chapter 1. Please let me know in the comments if you liked it, if you have critique. If this does well, Chapter 2 is going to continue with waking up on the beach and going from there. In the meantime, I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.